The system doesn't need you ignorant. It needs you unfocused. Because a distracted population doesn't resist. It consumes. It reacts. It obeys. You don't live in an age of information. You live in an age of information overload, a deliberate fog engineered to keep you reactive, overwhelmed, and predictable. This episode breaks down the real reason institutions flood your mind with noise. The system doesn't hide its power. It hides it behind everything else that demands your attention. A distracted mind cannot see patterns. A distracted society cannot question systems. And a distracted population cannot resist. If you want to understand how distraction redistributes power and how to reclaim sovereignty through focus, this episode is your turning point. Subscribe if you're done being occupied by noise. Focus is rebellion. You live in a world built on distraction, an engineered fog designed not to entertain you, but to immobilize you. The system doesn't need you uninformed. It needs you unfocused. It doesn't need to hide the truth. It only needs to make the truth impossible to prioritize. Distraction is not a glitch in the modern world. It is its operating system. Quiet, ambient, and omnipresent. And it works not by suppressing your awareness, but by overwhelming it. When everything feels urgent, nothing becomes important. When everything demands attention, nothing receives depth. You end up living in a perpetual state of reaction, never fully aware of what shapes you, never fully present in what you choose. The system doesn't rely on your ignorance. In fact, it thrives on your exposure. Endless streams of news, ads, scandals, crises, notifications, debates, warnings, opportunities, and emergencies. Information bombards you from every angle, not to enlighten you, but to disorient you. A disoriented population becomes predictable. Predictable populations are easy to steer. And those who can steer mass behavior don't need authority. They only need distraction. You scroll because stillness feels unnatural. You consume because silence feels threatening. You react because reflection has been replaced with urgency. And the more you respond to the noise, the less capable you become of recognizing the signal. This is by design. Look around you. Attention has become the world's most contested commodity. Governments fight to shape it. Corporations race to harvest it. Media competes to hijack it. Social networks weaponize it. Economic institutions rely on it. Every entity that depends on population behavior, the market, the vote, the workforce, the consumer economy, requires one thing above all: our attention. Not your agreement, not your obedience, just your constant, unbroken engagement. Distraction is the tax you pay to participate in modern society, and it is a tax collected continuously. But to understand why the system needs you distracted, you must understand how distraction redistributes power. Not metaphorically, mechanically. When you lose focus, you lose the ability to see patterns. When you lose patterns, you lose the ability to predict. When you lose prediction, you lose the ability to choose. And when choice collapses, control flows upward. The less attention you have, the more influence institutions acquire. Distraction shifts sovereignty, not through force, but through fatigue. The modern world overwhelms you not to break you, but to occupy you. A distracted mind is a compliant mind. A compliant mind is an economically useful mind. And an economically useful population is far easier to manage than an autonomous one. The system doesn't want rebellion. It wants busyness. A society too distracted to question anything is the most stable society that can exist. Consider the architecture. First, big tech. The attention economy didn't appear. It was engineered. Every notification is an interruption. designed to fracture cognitive momentum. Every watch next suggestion is a behavioral funnel. Every infinite scroll is a behavioral loop. These systems learn your impulses faster than you learn your own patterns. They know when you hesitate, what triggers you, what comforts you, what enrages you, what keeps you scrolling at 2 a.m. They optimize not for your clarity, but for your engagement. When your attention is fragmented, your depth disappears. And when depth disappears, discernment evaporates. You don't question what you consume, because consumption leaves no space for questioning. The system needs you entertained, stimulated, and slightly overwhelmed, never fully present, never fully still. Next, media. News cycles are not windows into reality. They are psychological centrifuges. Outrage, fear, tribalism, crisis, and drama. These aren't reflections of the world, they're tools to keep you hooked. A population addicted to emotional volatility is easy to distract and hard to stabilize. The more reactive you become, the less discerning you are. When everything feels like a crisis, you no longer distinguish between what's meaningful and what's irrelevant. Media doesn't need to lie to you. It just needs to keep you continuously alarmed. Alarm is profitable. Alarm is predictable. And the population living in permanent reaction mode is a population incapable of structural analysis. You can't question systems when you're drowning in headlines. Then, politics. Political distraction is the oldest form of social control. Manufactured conflicts, polarized narratives, outrage cycles timed with electoral calendars. Leaders frame opponents as existential threats, not to reveal truth, but to monopolize attention. If you are busy hating the other side, you are not examining the power structures controlling both sides. A society divided against itself becomes too fragmented to notice the quiet changes. Legislation passed in the night, rights eroded in increments, policies hidden inside budgets, influence purchased through lobbying. Distraction keeps you fighting shadows while power consolidates in daylight. When the people are consumed by tribal identity, systems operate with impunity. Now, consumer capitalism. The market thrives on attention scarcity. Advertising is not designed to convince you. It's designed to overwhelm you. You're surrounded by triggers, colors, sounds, placement, repetition. Every storefront, app, billboard, logo, and email is a psychological lure. Your desires are shaped gradually through constant exposure. You don't want what you want. You want what's been repeatedly shown to you. Distraction shifts your values from internal to external, making you dependent on manufactured desire. A distracted consumer is a profitable consumer. You buy more because you think less. You accumulate because you don't question the impulse. And the more you accumulate, the more dependent you become on the system that supplies your dopamine. Even the financial system uses distraction as a shield. Inflation is reframed as growth. Debt is marketed as opportunity. Market turbulence is repositioned as normal. The complexity of finance is not accidental. It creates intellectual barriers. If everything is confusing, nothing becomes actionable. Distraction becomes a moat that protects the interests of those who understand the system. You can't challenge what you can't comprehend, and you can't comprehend what you don't have the attention to study. Look at global economics. A population overwhelmed with daily stress, rent increases, rising prices, job pressure, credit card debt, is too mentally exhausted to question deeper mechanisms like monetary expansion, wage suppression, corporate consolidation, or tax loopholes. When people are struggling for stability, long-term awareness collapses. Distraction becomes survival. The system exploits this by keeping populations in a permanent state of low-level anxiety. Not crisis, just enough pressure to fragment attention. Governments learned that controlling information is far less effective than flooding it. If you hide information, people start searching. If you drown them in information, people stop thinking. A population overwhelmed by contradictory data becomes passive. Confusion leads to apathy. Apathy leads to compliance. Control thrives not on censorship, but on overload. Even education is built on distraction. Curriculums filled with irrelevant facts, endless homework, standardized testing, memory-based learning. Students trained to cram, not understand. Schools don't prepare children for autonomy. They prepare them for obedience through mental fatigue. By the time they become adults, they internalize distraction as normal. They mistake busyness for purpose. They mistake movement for progress. And they mistake exhaustion for achievement. The most powerful form of control is to make people exhaust themselves willingly. But the system's dependence on distraction goes deeper. It is not merely about control, it is about stability. If populations were focused, reflective, and analytically capable, they would question why wages stagnate while productivity rises, why corporations pay less tax than citizens, why inflation benefits the wealthy, why debt traps are normalized, why politics resembles theater, why tech companies manipulate behavior, why the economy requires consumption instead of efficiency, why privacy ended without protest. Focus is dangerous. Focus threatens the architecture. So the system floods your senses with a constant stream of stimuli to ensure you never fully direct your attention inward. A focused population would be uncontrollable. A distracted population is self-governing, ruled by impulses the system engineered. Distraction is easier than discipline, and institutions rely on that asymmetry. The world doesn't hide its mechanisms. It simply keeps you too occupied to investigate them. Every crisis, every scandal, every trending topic, every algorithmic recommendation is another thread pulling your mind away from structural awareness. While your attention chases noise, your autonomy evaporates quietly. But there is an even deeper level. Distraction shapes your identity. When your attention is fragmented, your sense of self becomes fragmented. You become a series of reactions instead of a coherent individual. This weakens your ability to resist. When your identity is unstable, your values become malleable. You adopt beliefs impulsively. You adopt emotions externally. You become a reflection of stimuli. Distraction is not merely an annoyance. It is identity erosion. And identity erosion is the foundation of mass compliance. You become easier to manage when you don't know who you are. You become easier to influence when you cannot sustain focus. You become easier to control when your internal world is noisy. And you become easier to guide when your attention is externally owned. You don't need chains, you need interruptions. You don't need censorship, you need noise. You don't need suppression, you need stimulation. The system does not confine your body, it confines your focus. But here's the part most people never realize. The system doesn't need you to be distracted all the time. It needs you to be distracted at the right times. Before elections, during economic downturns, after financial scandals, between policy changes, when corporate consolidations happen quietly, when rights are being eroded incrementally, when new surveillance technologies are rolled out, when markets are artificially inflated, when wars begin or alliances shift. Distraction is timed, not random, not arbitrary, strategic. When attention clusters around the sensational, it vacates the structural. When millions are focused on celebrity drama, they are not examining newly passed trade agreements. When the population debates culture wars, they are not noticing deregulation. When people rage over sound bites, they ignore the quiet shifts in monetary policy that affect them more than any headline. The system needs you emotional because emotion consumes focus. It needs you reactive because reaction prevents reflection. It needs you engaged because engagement prevents resistance. It needs you overwhelmed because overwhelm destroys autonomy. The world has not become more complex. Your mind has become more occupied. And in that occupation, your sovereignty dissolves. But here is the truth. The system never expects you to discover. Distraction is a structure, and structures can be studied. And anything that can be studied can be neutralized. The first step is awareness, recognizing the pattern. The second step is detachment, refusing to be triggered. The third step is discipline, building focus as a form of rebellion. And the fourth step is clarity, learning to differentiate signal from noise. Once you reclaim your attention, you begin to see the world not as it appears, but as it operates. You see the motives behind information, not the information itself. You see patterns across years, not events across days. You begin to understand the architecture, the incentives, the levers, the defaults. And in that understanding, distraction loses its power. The system relies on your unconscious participation. The moment you become a conscious observer, you disrupt its efficiency. The truth is simple. The system needs you distracted because a focused mind cannot be governed. A focused population cannot be manipulated. A focused individual cannot be controlled. And in a world built on distraction, focus becomes the ultimate form of power. If you want to stop being a piece on the board, subscribe, because the ones who understand the game are the only ones who stop being played.